Like Tahrir Square, Pearl Roundabout is a place resonant with the aspirations and dashed hopes of the Arab Spring. Today, thousands of people in Bahrain are expected to march there, the focal point of the uprising which began exactly a year ago. The financial harbour district of Bahrain's capital city has been sealed off by police, and in villages outside the capital, police have fired heavy volleys of tear gas at protesters. An independent inquiry commissioned by the Bahraini government in November confirmed that there had been an excessive use of force and systematic torture of prisoners. Bahrain's information minister, Sheikh Abdul Aziz bin Mubarak, told the Today programme that conditions had improved.
No one is trying to hide that fact. This was a bitter pill for us to swallow, and there are many lessons to be learned. And we have started to put those things right. Procedures have been reversed, and we are in a much better position than we were a year ago. People are allowed to march anytime they want, as long as it does not infringe on the public security and on the rights of the other people living here in Bahrain.
Well, one of the main opposition groups is led by Abdul Jalil Khalil. We spoke to him before he headed for this lunchtime's protest and asked if he agreed that things were getting better.
On the ground, we have seen no differences. After submitting the report on 23rd of November last year, we have at least now 15 people killed. Number one. Number two, using the tear gas on all villages where really you can't really sit in your house because the type of tear gas being used is really unaffordable. So we haven't noticed, or recognized any differences. I'm not going to say that nothing done, but the core of the Basuni report has not yet implemented.
So let me ask you now, what do you think is going to happen with the demonstrations today centred on Pearl Roundabout?
People will continue their struggle through political rallies, through the political demonstrations. Our demands are clearly outlined on our manifesto. We have been asking for an elected government instead of appointed government since 1972.
That was one view from the opposition parties in Bahrain, Abdul Jalil Khalil. So what should the UK's reaction be to events there? The Conservative MP Conor Burns, who is chairman of the all-party group on Bahrain, joins me now, and so does the Liberal Democrat peer, Lord Avebury, Liberal Democrat. So Conor Burns, we heard a view from the opposition parties that really nothing significantly has changed in Bahrain.
Well, I think you also heard an acknowledgement that there has been progress, there has been an independent commission. The reaction of the government in Bahrain has been very different to the reaction of other governments, for example, in Syria and in Libya. It has invited in renowned international lawyers to make recommendations. It's invited in our own John Yates, formerly of the Metropolitan Police, to review policing procedures in Bahrain. No one, and it's certainly not my task, is defending everything that's going on or pretending that everything is perfect. But reform is a process, not an event, and there has been great movement in the course of the last year.
Lord Avebury, isn't it to the credit of the government in Bahrain that it did bring in this independent human rights commission and indeed has brought in a number of outsiders to look at the police force and to look at the way the security forces operate?
Well, it certainly would have been to their credit if they'd implemented the recommendations of the Basuni Commission, which was promised by the King when the findings of the Commission were released at a big press conference. But nothing has happened. They've still got all the political prisoners, hundreds of them in prison, including foremost human rights activists like Abdul Hadi al-Khawaja. There are people who are waiting for compensation for the tortures they received. 5 people were killed under torture, as it was acknowledged in the Basuni Commission report. But no one has been compensated, and the victims of torture are still remaining uncompensated for the sufferings that they endured. Freedom of expression is denied. No journalists have been allowed in to cover the anniversary demonstrations today.
Let me put those points to Conor Burns then. It's no good in having an independent human rights commission if their findings aren't implemented, and it seems political prisoners are still in jail.
Martha, we can certainly agree that the process of implementing that commission findings could be much faster, but it is simply not correct, as my colleague from the House of Lords asserts, that nothing has happened. For example, the ambassador, Ala Suleiman, comes in the Bahrain ambassador to Britain, comes into Parliament about every 6 weeks to make a presentation to members of both houses who wish to come along about the progress of implementing the recommendation, which have been implemented, which are in progress, and which are still aspirations. And it is our duty as friends of Bahrain. Bahrain is a very long-standing friend and ally of the United Kingdom, to put pressure on the government in Bahrain to go further and faster. But it is unfair to classify Bahrain in the same category as some of these other countries that have been part of what the so-called Arab Spring.
Would you acknowledge, Lord Avebury, that the action taken by the government there is different from many other countries in the region?
Well, the sad thing is that the friendship that we've endured with Bahrain for many, many years doesn't result in greater influence. That ministers have been there. Alistair Burt went in December and had conversations with the government. He was unable to persuade them that they should release the political prisoners. That doesn't take 5 minutes. It could have been done immediately. And the compensation that was called for by Bassiouni Commission to the victims of tortures could have been paid immediately. Freedom of expression could have been restored. They could stop blocking the Bahrain Centre for Human Rights website. They could stop imprisoning bloggers. All of these things could have been done instantaneously.
Do you think, Conor Burns, that more needs to be done to resolve some of the sectarian problems that we've seen between the Sunni ruling family and the Shia majority?
Absolutely, because that goes absolutely to the core of the ongoing problems in Bahrain. And I would urge the opposition to do two things. One, for their supporters to heed the call of their leaders for the current protests to be peaceful. And secondly, for them to engage in the dialogue. But can I just return to this point that nothing has happened? We, from the all-party group, have put points on human rights. For example, on the case of the two individuals who were sentenced to death, directly to the Crown Prince, directly to the King. And those two sentences were subsequently commuted. It is not fair to say that Alistair Burt's visits to Bahrain have had no impact at all. The Bahrainis respect us as a long-standing friend and listen to our voice, and it is our job to continue to put pressure on them to speed up the process of reform. And Bahrain is very, very different to many others in the region. There's free elections, there's freedom of religious worship. These things should be encouraged and fostered, and we should make clear to the Bahrainis that as our friends we expect much more of them.
Conor Burns, Lord Avebury, thank you both. Well, we can talk now to our